Good morning, everyone. We're welcome to today's webinar on the topic of effective and efficient management reporting for government. We are in the process of kicking off this webinar shortly. We just wait a couple of more minutes and we will start. So, welcome everyone. Thank you once again for joining us on this webinar. My name is Angela Ashton and I am Tridant's Marketing Manager. The main focus of this webinar is to look at management reporting from a government perspective. I'd like to introduce you to today's speakers. We have Willem Boshoff, who is a Tridant Director with over 17 years experience in performance management. He is instrumental in delivering high caliber solutions based on realistic expectations and proven practices. We then have David Meadway, who is a Managing Consultant at Trident with over 10 years experience in the information technology sector and the last 5 years focusing on TM1 implementations. We then have Anstee, who is a Managing Consultant for Business Intelligence here at Trident. He's a thought leader in marrying design and BI technologies, including mobile deployments. And Astrid Hansard, who is a part of the Marketing Trident team and will be the webinar facilitator managing today's polling questions. So I'd like to just talk to you a little bit and give you an overview of Trident. Trident is a leader in the design and implementation of technology solutions optimized for planning, reporting and analytics. Key to our success is our status as a multi-award-winning IBM Premier Business Partner, where we have achieved triple gold accreditation in Business Intelligence, TM1 and Cognos Disclosure Management. We are also supported by additional BI technology vendor partners. Trident has formed strong and long-standing relationships with other clients from a variety of industry sectors, working with 6 out of 10 of the largest companies in Australia. We have established offices throughout Australia and have recently opened up an office in Singapore. We're also very proud to say that last year we were awarded IBM Solutions Partner of the Year, and this success was mainly due to our people's commitment, creativity and proven industry practices and authenticity in solving challenging client business problems in the field of business performance and analytics. In addition, Trident's Government Integration Planning and Reporting solution features an IBM's Global Solutions Directory. And this solution allows government departments to improve overall service delivery to the community by helping the business make better informed decisions, assist in driving a culture of accountability, and improve the focus on the effective delivery of government policy. I'd now like to hand you over to Willem Boshoff, who will kick off today's webinar.
Good morning, everybody. Just going to start our PowerPoint and okay, well, thank you first of all for taking the time out. We promised to try and keep it as exciting as possible and to have this webinar wrapped up within about 40 to 45 minutes. And I thought what I'll do is just kick it off with 5 slides to help position what we have done. And what's really covered by this application from a reporting perspective. It's obviously an integrated planning and reporting system, and what you'll see is that there'll be a follow-up webinar coming out soon. We're aiming around October, where we're going to cover off some of the budgeting, forecasting and planning aspects of this application. So today's focus is pretty much on management reporting. It's based on 2 successful deliveries of this project at DSDBI, so that's Department of State Development Business Innovation, and DTPLI Victoria, Department of Transport, Planning and Local Infrastructure. The first thing is, I guess, is just to set the scene in terms of Trident's approach. So everybody should see the slide referred to as the Trident approach. It really just underpins our methodology and how we go by working with our clients, and it's really 3 aspects that I'm briefly going to cover off. The first part is around the collection of information or the collection of data, and so in blue text there I sort of highlighted the 3 things that's relevant from this application perspective, and I think the first one to discuss briefly the fact that we are collecting information on an intraday basis out of complex systems such as SAP and Oracle E-Business Suite, really with the objective to support the financial month-end reporting process. For those of you that have worked with these sorts of systems before, especially the ones that involves complex data warehouses, they often rely on a 24-hour cycle or a 24-hour turnaround from when you enter your journals and until you can then leverage that information onto your management reporting pack. So it was one of the success criteria of this application was that ability to close the books quicker with an Oracle and then update the relevant reporting repositories so that on the same day the finance team is still able to deliver some of the management reports that's important to the business. And the objective there really was to streamline and to optimize the month-end reporting process. The next part is really around managing that information, and this is where we start to really add value to information that is, it's sort of hidden or captured within the complex ERP systems, but not easy accessible for your classic business user. So it's really that process of combining information. So often it's about combining the financial information with non-financial indicators like FTE numbers. We then extend the information. For example, the chart of accounts is very often restricted to 6 or 7 segments, but often other items are important to government. So for example, the ability to report against ministerial portfolios or to report against related parties to understand who's charging who in an intercompany process. Or very often just adding other segments to the data, for example, the ability to report against outputs or the services that government has committed to deliver. The application cater for allocations, the capturing of manual data, commentary and narrative is becoming very important. It's sort of that preemptive cycle of explaining negative or positive variances before questions gets asked, and all that information gets captured in a centralized sector environment. And then once all that information is ready, we then make it available through a series of interfaces where people can plan, report, analyze, and do the things that they're pretty good at, leveraging the tools that they're familiar with, such as Microsoft Excel, or then some of the examples that you'll see today are leveraging business intelligence tools, both from a TM1 perspective or from a Cognos BI perspective, to automate report development and make it easier for the average user to get to information and to rely less on other individuals. So that's the basic flow. How we approach these applications is about collecting data, setting it up, managing it, getting everybody comfortable with the level of detail, and then making it available through a series of tools and methods where people can use it. A very brief or high-level solution architecture. This is with courtesy from DSDBI. Just what you'll see there on the left-hand side is the 3 main source systems. Is the Oracle E-Business Suite system, with a specific focus in this case on the GL, accounts payable, accounts receivable, and procurement. We're adding to that grants information about just management of grants, because they do a lot of that, and also out of the payroll system, in this case it's CRIS21, the collection of FTE data and some other relevant statistics to help justify expenditure changes. All that information gets updated on demand within a centralized data mart, We then combine that with the planning data that lives within TM1. And we're catering for three main processes. The BIRC is really the Victorian term for initiatives, or the Expenditure Review Committee. It's really new money or new capital money that needs to be approved, flowing into the forward estimates, flowing into the department's internal budget. All that information gets captured. It goes through an approval process until the point where we're into the financial year where you can start to do your management reporting against some of those plans. And then from a reporting perspective, three main products that helps to enable this is on the Cognos BI side from a BI tool perspective, TM1 from a planning and forecasting perspective, as well as some Excel-based reporting that you'll see shortly. And Cognos Disclosure Management was the tool of choice to help create complex report packs where multiple people are involved, and to really help govern and control the process on how they go by producing a single document made up of contributions from multiple parties. On our website, so you'll see there's a link at the bottom. On our website, trident.com.au, under the Solutions, Industry Solutions section, you'll find a flyer documentation that goes into a bit more detail. But just very briefly, on the bottom, we have all the various data sources. At the top, we have the different kinds of user interfaces. It's important for these applications to cater for everybody, and not just, for example, the executive or the finance community, but really the business at a branch level that are running day-to-day work. And then on the left-hand side, the sort of activities that this application has been designed to cater for. So it's all the way from reporting against actuals, planning initiatives, moving into the forward estimates and getting forward estimates approved and tracking them and reporting against the audit trails that's important to government, forecasting the year-end position, creating or allocating the detailed budget within the department, and then large but still a fairly important piece is the whole performance reporting or performance monitoring that government departments tend to do back to Treasury. The boxes in the middle highlights the key solution components or modules that can be in scope for a classic implementation of this nature. Before I hand over to David, from a presentation perspective, this is I guess we thought, well, how do we articulate the reason for going down this path? And it really comes down to these four messages. The first one is around simplification. So it's really about, I guess, the steps involved to deliver information to help the business or the branch managers manage current and future funding arrangements. It's about getting information, helping them to understand and analyze and then use that information without doing a lot of manual work, or really to minimize the current volume of manual work that used to be the case. From an efficiency perspective, it's about redefining the role of finance and finance managers. Okay, it's about spending less time on data preparation, allowing for more time to help understand and manage. Sustainability played a fairly big role here, so both DSDBI and DTPLI were on disparate systems, so they had separate systems for each planning process. They had a separate system from a reporting perspective. Some of those systems were outdated and have reached end of life and no longer were supported by either the vendor or by local skill sets in the market. And it was important to address that risk, to address the new solution, to come up with something that is fairly current. It's of enterprise scale. It covers all the functionality that finance and business requires, and trying to combine these key government planning and reporting activities into a single solution. And that was also one of the key success criteria and drivers for doing this project in the first place. And then the last bit is around just making people more effective. It's about getting broader business involvement so that we can take this beyond the role of the finance person and making people less reliant on individuals in the organization for when they need information at short notice, which happens quite a lot. So it's very often that the minister or someone would phone up and ask for a list of savings across a set of projects that afternoon for a session that they might need to address in Parliament. So how do we make people more effective to generate that information efficiently without the reliance on other people that may not be in the office that day? I'll summarize or end up with these few value statements. And before I hand over, we've got just 3 polls that we would like to bring up and ask you to respond to these 3 polls. And then David Meadway will give us a brief presentation on some of the Excel use cases and how people are leveraging their existing skill sets within Microsoft Office. Thanks, Astrid. Can you please run the polls?
You could join us this morning. So polls, we've got 3 polls, and I'll just launch the first one. Please rate your month-end existing reporting system. I'll give you a few minutes to fill out that poll. So I've just been told that there are some technical difficulties. I hope you can hear me now. Yeah, so just a quick poll. I'll give you a few minutes to fill it out. And I guess that's probably enough time. Great. And I'll launch the second poll. So which ERP systems do you use? Great, most of you have voted, so and third and last poll. If you could change one thing about your existing system, what would it be? Great. So I will just share this with everybody. So perhaps I'll pass over to Willem and he can comment on the results.
Okay, thanks everybody. Thanks for participating. That's always a good indication. Look, it's a mature environment. It's really about making things better, and it's good to see that there's some scope there for everyone to hopefully get some value from the session out of today. David, I've just handed over to you. Are you ready to take over?
Thank you, Willem. Okay, thank you, Willem. I'll just wait for my screen to appear. But I'll get started. But as Willem has mentioned, I'll be taking you through some Tier 1 examples, as well as just touching on Cognos Disclosure Management right at the end, just to give you an idea what that product can do. So, just another minute or so to get my screen up. Great, thank you. I think Great. I think everyone should be able to see my screen now. So before I get into the TM1 reporting, I'll just give you some background on Oracle and the data mart we created at DSDBI. So for those who are familiar with Oracle, you'll be aware that some implementation of Oracle could contain thousands of tables, and those tables could contain millions of transaction records. And to get data out of those type of systems, you do need an underlying understanding of the underlying data structure of the ERP system. So to streamline the reporting process, we've created a data mart, and as part of the data mart, we import only certain of the tables and do the joins and all the hard work as part of that import. So the transaction data that we import, as Willem mentioned, are the general ledgers, so we get the journals and the balances, purchase orders, accounts receivable, accounts payable, and then we do get data from two other systems in terms of payroll data, FTE and headcount from CRIS21, as well as grants management system. We get the balances from there. As part of the import, we do import the chart of accounts, and as Willem mentioned, a lot of the time the chart of accounts is limited. So in terms of the DSDBI application, we only brought in, they only have 5 segments to the chart of accounts. And to demonstrate that, I'm just going to jump into Perspectives. And Perspectives is the TM1 add-in for Excel. And under the cubes, I'm going to click on the financial reporting cube. And this is the cube where we store the journal data. If I expand that and I expand dimensions, you can see the dimensions which make up the cube, and the dimensions are used to store the data. So this is how we can analyze the data. So in terms of the chart of account for DSDBI, we got entity, source, cost center, account, and project from the Oracle system. I'm just going to double click on the account dimension, and this will show you how the structure of the account dimension is set up. What you can see on the screen are 3 account roll-ups. The first one is the ETF roll-up. The second one is the management accounts roll-up. The last one is the statutory account roll-up. They essentially contain the same data, but the way the data is consolidated is different. So if I expand management accounts and I expand stat account, you can see they both have an asset roll-up, but if I expand the assets, you can see that they are consolidated differently. And this allows the user to use the same data in the same cube, but by choosing different consolidators, they can get different type of reports. For example, if they were to report to DTF, they would use the DTF rollup, and if they needed to create statutory reports, they would use the stat account rollup. So because we only got 5 of the chart of account elements out of Oracle, in this application we needed to extend that chart by related party, output, ministerial portfolio, and region. So I'm just going to double click on output to show you what that looks like. And what we do is when we import the data based on the source, we then allocate it against an output as well. And by that we can extend the data, and the user can then start analyzing the data by these extra chart of account elements as well. So with that background out the way, I'm going to jump into a report example. And the first example I'm going to open up is what we call a canned report, or a pre-built report. And these are reports that normally get built beforehand that multiple users use, and they use it quite often. So I'm just going to double click on the balance sheet. That'll open it up in Excel. And that's the first thing you notice. This isn't a familiar environment to most of us. Once it's in Excel, you can use any Excel functionality. The difference would be if I click on a number and I click in the formula bar, you can see that it's using a DBRW formula. And this is a TM1 or Cognos TM1 formula that would retrieve or send data back into the base. Secondly, you'll notice at the top we have filters. If I click on one of these filters, you'll see there's also a sub-NM formula, and this is another Cognos formula. What this formula allows us to do is it allows us to open up the dimension editor, and from here I could select another element. Then if I refresh my report, you'll see the data changes in accordance with the filter that I've selected at the top. In this report we've also only exposed certain of the chart of account elements, so entity, source, cost center, and project. So I could double click on cost center. At the moment I'm looking at all cost centers combined. I could then just select tourism an aviation, or I could go down further and select a lower down element. If I choose that one and I refresh it, you'll see the data changes in accordance with my filters at the top. So that's an example of one of the pre-built reports that was built. Secondly, I'll show you that although there are pre-built reports, users who have access to the system can create their own reports or convert existing reports that they've already created by using these TM1 formulas. So to illustrate that, I'm going to go back into my cubes and I'm going to double click on the financial reporting cube. What that will do is that opens up the cube viewer, and this is an easy way for the users to interrogate the data without having to pull the numbers into Excel. And I set up this view previously, and it just has the supplies and consumable accounts down the rows, as well as the periods across the top. And then I'm going to click on the slice button at the top here, and what that will do is that then slices that information into Excel. So what I'll do is I'll just format this report. So the user might create a report like this and decide this is something they would want to use often, and they might format it might just apply some Excel formulas or Excel formatting to make it look better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide that. I'm going to apply some number formatting, and then I might also just put some colors on this report to make it look better. The last thing I might do is I might realize that I'd actually like the year, the total for the year as well. So I could either use a sum formula to get that, or if I know that that number is stored in the database, I could use a DBRW formula to retrieve the number that's against the year consolidator. So to do that, I would just type in the year at the top, and then what I can do is I can just drag the DBRW formulas across. You'll see if I click on this DBRW formula, it is now referencing 2013. If I refresh that, it then brings back the numbers for the year. If I decide to keep this report, what I can do is I can load it onto TM1. And to do that, I just click on the TM1 ribbon and I click on Upload. That'll bring up the TM1 application folders, and I can choose a folder to put it in. I'm going to choose Financial Reporting. Now if I close this, don't save it, and I go back to my Perspectives Explorer and I expand Financial Reporting, the workbook I've just created and saved is now on the server, and I can double click it and refresh it and also just share it with other users. Another thing to note is that once anything that you've stored on TM1 is accessible through TM1 Web. So I'm just going to log into, open up Internet Explorer and log into TM1 Web. Down the side under Applications, you'll see this is a direct replication of what's in my perspectives. If I expand Financial Reporting, the book that I've just created is there. You can click on that, and I do have access to this through TM1 Web as well. I can also open one of the pre-built reports. I click on Balance Sheet, the one I opened previously, and from there you can see it's the same report, and I have the same functionality in terms of choosing different periods or different cost centers, and that will update accordingly. So that's just a basic understanding and a basic example of how to use Excel to retrieve data from TM1. The next thing I might look into is that, as Willem mentioned, for users to get, the user might get a request regarding why Nav Explorer, and I'm going to talk in the system at a high level 4-year budget, but these numbers are to source. You can see what the number started out as, and then all the changes that have affected the number and what the number is clean. So as an analyst, you might receive a request to say, why is source 004 what it is. So I'm going to just open up the estimates cube, open up the forward estimates cube, and view created earlier. What it's got down the side, it's got references, and each journal goes against a new reference. And they put through a journal, it also goes against a specific adjustment code. So I'm just going to open up the adjustment code dimension and I'm going to expand all adjustment codes. And what we have there are the different explanations for changing a number. So for example, it could be a carryover, or it could be so what I'm going to do is I'm going to change to the fund source 004, which is the one I've got the request about. I'm just going to go into the subset editor, choose 004, click on OK, and refresh that. That now brings back the numbers only related to this fund source. I can see that there's been 6 journals put against this fund source. And if I expand the adjustment code, it also shows me what the reasons for each adjustment was. So for example, reference 21 or journal 21 was other funding, and reference 22 was carryover. If this is the report I would like to send off to the person who requested the information, I can at this point click on snapshot, and snapshot is essentially the same as the slice, except if you click on a number, you'll see it's a static number. So this is a type of report you could send to somebody who hasn't got access to the system. I could then, adjust the colors to maybe highlight the section of the report that they were querying, and then I could save this and send it off for the user to review. Cool. So that's a brief example of how to use TM1. Next thing I'm just going to quickly talk about CDM. Or Cognos Disclosure Management, and in its most basic form, Cognos Disclosure Management puts workflow around reports or documents that multiple users will work on, and it combines text as well as numeric data from your data sources. So if you look to the left of the screen, CDM is able to bring in data from relational databases, OLAP tools, as well as data that's not in any database and just sitting in an Excel report. Multiple users can then work on the same report at the same time, and then once they're busy, once they've completed their section of the report, it can go through a workflow process. In this case, it goes to reviewer and then to approvers, and then once it's been approved and all sections of the report have been approved, it can be generated and the whole report is combined together while refreshing the data from the databases. CDM cuts down on rekeying, cutting and pasting, reformatting, ticking and tying, manual hands-off, and lots of versions. A good example of a report that fits well into Cognos Disclosure Management would be the annual report that has a lot of textual information or explanations of numbers, and then the numbers themselves that will come from your ERP or your OLAP tool. On my last slide, it's just an example of what the front end for CDM looks like. Down the left-hand side, it's how the report is broken up. So each of the report is broken up into different Word and Excel objects. And then in the middle of the screen, that's an example of the at-a-glance object, which is a Word object. You'll see there's text, but instead of numbers, we use tags to a number in Excel sheet, which is represented in the top right-hand corner of the screen. So in this case, at-a-glance year-to-date expenditure is 119 million, but in the actual CDM front end, we just reference the number. Then when we generate the report, it goes through and it will replace these tags with the actual numbers from the spreadsheet. And this way, if any numbers change in your database, it will change in every position in your report that it is used. Great, thank you very much. I'll be handing over to Zach now, who will take you through a BI example.
Thanks for that, David. Thanks for that, David. Just whilst the screen is being handed over to my screen, I'll just get talking about and maybe just get your minds passed back to when William was first discussing some of the architecture that went behind the overall solution. And we had, amongst things, we had the source systems, where we had the Oracle, and that then got fed into a data warehouse, and also supported by the TM1 cubes. David quite nicely went through some of those cubes, in particular on the finance, where we saw a number of hierarchies and dimensions. And what we've been able to do here through Cognos BI is to connect to both of those sources. So really what I'm going to be showing here is a management dashboard. That management dashboard is going to be using primarily TM1, one of the financial cubes, as a data source and presenting that data. But the clever part is where we start needing to drill down the various layers. Going from a summary to a more detailed view of the information, eventually through into the underlying transactions. Now that summary content is being held in the TM1 cube. Our transaction information is then being held in the underlying data warehouse, which is very good at storing very granular, very atomic information. So the two, and those data sources are complemented by the BI tool. And maybe I'll just start showing some of those reports right here. So you should all now see my screen, and really this is the entry point into Cognos BI, known as Cognos Connection. It's a web-based portal where you can manage your information, including reports and data sources and amongst other things. I won't go through everything on the page there. Maybe we'll just cut to the chase and have a look at the reports themselves. As you can see running down on the left-hand side, there's a number of reports there, but I'm just going to focus on one of them, and that's this management dashboard. So just clicking on that at the moment, I'm just going to set an expectation with the performance. We're running off my laptop, and it obviously isn't as beefy as some of the servers out there, so be a little bit patient with some of the run times. It all should run under 5 seconds as I go through each of the screens. So here we go. Here's our management dashboard. There's a few things on the page there. We normally try and break up the page up into quarters, and in that top part there you can see it's very account centric, and then on the bottom part we're talking more about the cost centers. In that top left, when we look at the grid there, we can see our a breakdown at quite a high level of the account information, where it details the actuals, our budgets, and some of those variance figures. And quite importantly, we want to see how we're tracking against our budget. To see that gap between our budget and our actual, we can see on the right-hand side next to that grid a graphical representation of that information. So we can very quickly see how full we are against that budget for that particular period. And at the moment, we can see that we're tracking quite nicely. And in that bottom half here, we're talking more about the accounts. Same thing again is that we've got our list of accounts at a particular level. We're at what's known as level 1 within the hierarchy, and there are many levels within that hierarchy. And the same set of information, the same set of what we call measures running across on the columns. We've got our actual, our budgets, our variances, and how we're tracking against that budget. I'll just take your eyes up to the top part of the screen where we've got some what we call prompts. And those prompts can control the information and filter the context on the page. So at the moment, for instance, we're in November. I'm able to go back a month and run it for an October period. So that is running at the moment. It should return relatively quickly. Next to that, we've got like a calendar view where we also have various views of the data. So at the moment, we're looking at a monthly level, but we could very easily switch over to a year-to-date look at that information, or again, it could be a full year view of that information. I'm just going to leave it at month for the purposes of this demonstration. So we can now see the figures have changed. We can see our charts now look a little bit differently because the context on the page is now for October 2013. We have further capability to filter at this point, so I'm just going to hit this little icon here, and I've got a page here which is really like a prompt page, and it's exposing those hierarchies which David talked about a little bit earlier. We've got things like we've got our entity hierarchy or our entity dimension, we've got our source dimension, cost center, account, and project, and we can select any element within that hierarchy. So as I expand on that dimension, we can now see that the CO, MGT entity is made up of these 3 elements, and within each one of those elements they also have children. So we can see the children which then make up that parent, and so on and so forth as you work down your hierarchy. And that's for all and every single one of these dimensions. We can see that we can work our way through and see all the children and pick any one of those elements which are going to be applicable to that person driving that report. We actually had a bit of control as well. I mean, there's obviously a lot of information in there. For each one of the users that logged on, they had a security wrapped around them, and they only saw those entities and cost centers, or in particular cost centers, which were applicable to them, which is good for security to make sure that people are only seeing what they're meant to see, but also takes out some of that noise so they can hone in on the information which is relevant to them. So I'm going to hit finish at this point. It's going to run. I actually haven't selected anything, but any one of those elements could have been selected. So we're back at our management report. Just going to show some other functionality in here that, for instance, a business user could be interested in this corporate planning and compliance services and maybe want to know a little bit more about this number and what's making up that particular number. So they can right-click on that number and drill down, and that's now going to, similar to how we saw in the dimensions before, it's now going to show the children which actually make up that particular number. So if I scroll down to the bottom, we can see our corporate planning. We can see that 2.5 million, but we can now see those individual numbers which make up that parent, that summary number. So too, the charts actually update as I drill down as well. So we can always see that graphical representation of my numbers. Some people like to see the numbers, and the accountants and the number crunchers like to see those numbers right down to the dollar, whereas other people like to see the graphics and the trends. So everything's there. We talked a little while ago about drill-through behavior, and that's the idea of creating a piece of information and drilling through to a next level of detail. So before we drill down a hierarchy, now I'd like to drill through to another report. So for finance and business services, I'm now going to go to my go-to, and in there is really a flyout which lists a number of different reports I can actually choose to go to. These are the core dimensions that we saw before around the account, cost center, project, and source. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to select project, and now I want to see for finance, businesses, and services for October 2013. For a monthly view, I'd like to see the projects which are actually making up those numbers. So again, just bear with the system for a moment as it just opens up the next report. And we can again see that 822,000 number is now being displayed on the report. We've got some information down below which gives us some of the context which is being passed through. So we can see the entity which is being passed through. We can see that cost center which I selected, the finance and business services. So all the context comes down the layer so that people don't have to toggle back and forth between screens. So at this point, I'm just going to delve down the hierarchy. At the moment, we're at a very aggregated point. I now want to select what's known here as a level 2. So level 1 would be the children directly underneath. Level 2 would be those children which make up that parent. And we can now see a more detailed breakdown of those numbers. And here you can see a common theme with your measures running across the top. Actual budget forecast, actual budget variance, and how we're tracking against our budget. We can now see the full list of information. So as we work our way down and scan our eyes down the screen here, we can kind of see something which is a little bit odd. And now I guess most people on the call would probably be pretty aware that it's quite important that for any project initiative which is being kicked off, there must be a budget that must be approved before that initiative can be kicked off. But we can see we're actually starting to bill against a project. We've got 28,000 against this reporting requirements in COA, but there's no budget. So from I guess a management point of view, you'd probably want to know what's actually making up that behavior. So this is where, to date, up until the drill through and the functionality that we've had, I've been using the TM1 cube as a data source. I'm now going to delve down into my data warehouse and start retrieving the transactions which make it up. So here I'm going to right-click again, and I'm going to go to and drill into my transactions. This is hitting a SQL Server data warehouse built using SSIS, just to give some of the technology behind it. And here we've got our report. So here's this 28,000 number that we spoke about. Here are the individual transactions which make up that particular number. A lot of information in there. there's a lot of information. I'm not going to go through it all, but what I will do is just start scrolling the screen over to the right so that you can see the width of information. Within BI, at any point you can actually export. So we're using HTML for this interactive behavior. But at any point you can hit an export feature and put it into Excel or PDF for printing, or for further analysis in Excel, if some people like to. A really nice part of what's being held in the data warehouse are the scanned purchase orders which are making up a particular transaction, and that can be called again from this report. So again, with using that single click behavior, I can now click on this attachment icon and call up that individual purchase order. Invoice, I should be saying invoice rather than purchase order. So we can now see who it is, what's being billed to, who the invoice is actually going to. So it's a lot of detail at that point. So really that was meant to be just a story showing how, like in the BI tool, we can layer against multiple data sources. We can use single-click drill through to get through the various layers or down the various hierarchy. We've got endless, well not endless, but we've got a lot of different filtering capabilities in there, which can therefore cater for a very wide audience and different types of cost centers. And then that ability to get right down into that granular information from, that first number that we saw on the dashboard all the way down into the invoice pretty quickly, pretty seamlessly, and it's quite a nice user experience. So really that's all I wanted to show for the purposes of demonstration, and probably around about this point I will hand back to Willem so that he can start wrapping up the presentation. So whilst that's happening, I'd like to thank you all for your attention, and if through that process, if anybody had any questions, please feel free to type a message, and we'll answer those at the end of the session. I'll hand over to Willem.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you, everybody. I hope that was of value. I thought that we'll wrap it up by maybe 4 or 5 points in real value feedback that we've had from our 2 clients in Victoria. These are just some of them. So Jim, who's the CFO at DSDBI, made a comment the other day to us in terms of one of the big things for him was the fact that he no longer needs to rely on very specific individuals when he's working late at the office around 7, sometimes 8 o'clock at night. He can get to the information by himself without assistance. So there was a big focus on ease of use. The other things that they will tell you is the significant reduction in manual work, the fact that you don't have 50 or 100 accountants all running their export routines out of the ERP systems and preparing spreadsheets and preparing data. It's fair to say that the majority, if not all of that, have been automated to make information available. I think it's the message around just enriching the data, so overcoming the limitations of the chart of accounts. So very often organizations need to invest quite a lot of money and time to upgrade the ERP systems in order to achieve this. And one of the biggest benefits here was the fact that we can address the compliance requirements as stipulated by DTF and extending the chart of accounts through a set of business rules and allocations to address some of the shortcomings, and a significant saving that extends the life of the current Oracle investment. Improve compliance, both internal and external stakeholders. So it's really about it's not just about the individuals within the organization, but there's also in government a lot of obligations to report externally, and to try and automate that as much as possible was a big part of it, and to deliver that external information in the format that's required rather than in a spreadsheet-specific format based on how it's always been done. And the last bit there is really just providing users a choice on how to get to information and how to use the information. This is not a model that is based on an autocratic way that you shall use this tool or you shall use this method. It's fair to say that the IBM software technology stack that was in use here really made up by 3 products. It's the business intelligence software, the TM1 software, the CDM software should be regarded as a very expansive tool set. with the ability to cater for the executive of an organization, the finance management of the organization, the financial analysts, the cost center managers and the levels in between, and that all have different ways on how they like to gather information, reformat that information, structure it, and so forth. And I think it's another thing that we can say with confidence that the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive in terms of how they use it to do things before and how we've simplified life and automated life a lot using some of these tool sets. So those were the 5 key value statements that I thought is worth bringing up based on feedback we've had, rather than the usual basic messages around reliability and flexibility and speed of thought and what so forth. So hopefully that's of significant interest, and feel free to get in touch with us, and I'm pretty confident that our clients will be happy to talk to you to validate some of these statements. With that, we'll want to wrap it up, and if there's any questions, we're happy to take a few now.
Hello, everybody. Just looking, there's one question. So I'll see what we get time for and see how many questions get asked, but I'll start with this one. So someone has asked, what is the turnaround time from making an adjustment in the GL until we can report on it? I think that's one for David.
Great. Thank you, Astrid. Yeah, so at the moment the turnaround time is under an hour, so that's from when the change is made in the ERP system, Oracle, until when it can be reported off in either TM1 or BI.
Great. Thanks, David. And just one more. So, Willem, how do you bring the budget information in?
Okay, so basically, if you recall the high-level solution architecture we brought together, there's 2 main data repositories. There's TM1 that we use to capture BERC submission data, BERC costing data. That's been integrated with the forward estimates module, which is really about just compiling and creating and maintaining forward estimates on an ongoing basis. And the last bit is to take those forward estimates and then allocating that down to the detail based on the chart of accounts. All of that is managed within TM1. And so we simply just add to that the actual data at a chart of accounts level coming from the data mart. And so TM1 is the centerpiece from where we collect the data and then use it for various budget planning and forecasting functions, and also against the management reporting or against the actual reporting part. So it's pretty much managed within the TM1 engine.
Great, thanks, Willem. And one more question has come in. We can just fit it in on time. Can the system do both management reporting and statutory reporting? David?
So as I showed earlier, they're based on the different roll-ups within the accounts, the chart of account structures. Depending on what type of reports need to be created, the user can either choose the stat roll-up or the management roll-up.
Great, too good. Well, thank you everybody for attending the webinar this morning. And yeah, I guess we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.